When the earth beneath our feet seems to topple and reel and shudder, we look for something to hang on to. Something with strength and reliability to assure that we can keep our equilibrium. When the leaders of the world walk defiantly in directions both reckless and threatening, dismantling all that we consider decent and wholesome and conducive to flourishing, we instinctively veer towards defiance, resistance, and counter-aggression. Or we retreat, we shrink, we succumb. Is there another response? How do we discern our position, our stance, our direction? The text from the prophet Jeremiah, the 17th chapter, verses 5 to 8, which Becky just read, guides us in our consideration. It is a statement of curses and blessings. And we shouldn't be surprised at this strong language, given our own propensity to strong language during this present environment. The first verses give us an idea of what our stance and our direction must be. Cursed are those who trust in mere humans, who rely on human strength and turn their hearts from Yahweh. They will be like a desert shrub. They will live in parched places, in a barren land. No one survives. This is a summary of what happens when humans rely on the unreliable, on the unsustainable, on the indefensible. This is what happens when humans bend to those who demand subservience. When there is mere parroting of talking points, a thoughtless acceptance of dictated norms, there will be parched places, a barren land with no survivors. There can be no well-being when there is a spiritual disconnect, when humans turn their hearts away from Yahweh, and that is away from spiritual wisdom, away from an order that reflects the harmony of nature. When humans pivot from the sacred and eternal wisdom and instead rely on finite strength, bluster, military might, executive orders, threats, and bullying, the outcome is certain. When we witness discrimination, violence, bullying, and threatening behavior and language, when human rights are stripped and human dignity is not upheld, we will not bend. This is a time to turn our hearts towards Yahweh. This is a time to redouble our efforts to learn practices, form alliances, connect with community, embrace reputable sources of information and light that build up rather than tear down. We will choose our stance, namely, in whom we trust. We will choose and affirm our direction, namely, turning our hearts to that which is sacred, eternal, and divine. Here there is no compromise. We will not bend. We are, however, in danger of applying this principle universally. That is, to declare that we won't bend for nor to anything. We resolve to be steadfast, unyielding, and unwavering. But we are not called to ruthlessness, to stubbornness, to harshness. No, we must balance our resolve to stand tall with a discernment that distinguishes rigidity from faithfulness to our spiritual calling. Let me give you an example from nature. UCC leader and pastor Reverend Cameron Trimble writes about a parable with its origins being in Zen Buddhism. The story is about a bamboo grove and a mighty storm. Trimble writes, and I quote, "When the winds began to rage, the tallest and the strongest trees stood firm, trying to resist the force of the storm, but their strength worked against them. The wind snapped their branches and toppled their trunks. The bamboo, however, bent low. It swayed with the wind, bowing deeply but never breaking. And when the storm finally passed, the bamboo stood upright again, rooted and whole." End quote. When an alternate way of being is called for, we must pray for discernment and look for unshakable wisdom. Discernment is needed in various places and at various times. It is needed when you encounter differing opinions. When will you bend and let go? And when will you stand tall to give an alternate opinion? We need to ask questions such as, is this a position that is completely opposite of what is important to me, to my faith community, to my understanding of God or humanity or the earth? Is it worth my time and my effort? Will it make a difference for the person with whom I engage and for me? If remaining silent will erode your or someone else's humanity, do not bend. We must always stand for dignity and humanity. If the conflict is with ideologies that are different from yours, but not fundamentally destructive, is that a time to bend, to weather the storm, to allow your compassion to rule? This may be a time to be the bamboo who will again rise from the storm and stand strong. Discernment is also needed when encountering hostility. When there is open hostility or even a threat of physical violence against you or someone right next to you or someone dear to you, you may need to make a quick decision. Thinking through options beforehand is important. Be realistic about what will bring about the greatest safety. Do what is in your power to de-escalate hostility. This may be a time to bend. Discernment is needed when encountering those who peddle fear. Fear paralyzes. Fear demoralizes. It will take discernment and careful consideration to differentiate actual danger and messages trumpeted by those who peddle fear intentionally. Messages of fear grow rapidly on online platforms. Be extremely vigilant not to succumb to them. Fear in itself is essential for human existence. Constant fear and fear about remote possibilities or even misinformation is destructive and requires a strong stance. This is a great time to revisit that text that Becky read and consider the blessings. The word happy is used in this translation for blessing. Happy are those, or blessed are those who trust in Yahweh, who rely on Yahweh. They will be like trees planted by the streams, whose roots reach deep down into the waters. They won't fear drought when it comes. Their leaves remain green. They won't be stressed in time of drought or fail to bear fruit. I love examples from nature because it is all around us and it's almost begging to be noticed. It's so accessible, so understandable. Here again is an example from trees. What trees do naturally, we humans need to be conscious of and then relearn through practices. The first practice is being planted strategically by streams. Now we all know that water is fundamental to the life of a plant. Without some water, even in the desert, water being the vehicle by which nutrients come out of the soil and are absorbed by the plant, without that, there is no life. And while hydration is very critical for humans, the essence of our life is also air. If we don't have air, we have no life. It is not inconsequential that the Hebrew word ruach means breath or wind or spirit. The divine spirit is essential for human life. This is why these conscious breathing practices, like Derek led us in this morning, they're some of the primary tools by which to connect to God. Breath, wind, spirit. Those are all concepts of faith, but they are all essentials for human vitality. A tree conserves her energy by sending her roots deep. This is how she grows, remains steadfast, and allows her to survive droughts. It's interesting that the prophet Jeremiah raises the element of fear. A strategically placed and well-rooted tree does not fear drought. A consciously aware human who connects with the Spirit of God deeply need not fear deception or distraction or disorientation. In the language of nature, their leaves remain green. Air, indeed, is all around us, and connection with the Spirit will guard us within this wilderness. And what about stress? What state of being is more prevalent in our late capitalist Western culture? Stress is everywhere. Stress robs us of a quality of life and ultimately takes life prematurely. Humans often wear stress as a badge of honor, proving their productivity and worth. But stress treats us like a boa constrictor. Here again, being steadfast, planted next to a stream, regularly connecting with the divine relieves this stress, and there can be fruit. Now let me put that in terms that are maybe a little more understandable for us today. To become a people who recognize those who walk defiantly into reckless and dangerous places, who dismantle all that we consider decent and wholesome and conducive to flourishing, we need practices that feed, nourish, and settle us. To become people of discernment, knowing how to respond in various situations, we need to deliberately turn our hearts towards God instead of relying on the next successful political agent to bail us out. We need to turn our hearts toward God, to discover and rediscover all that represents sacred and eternal wisdom, instead of trusting those who now ineptly head so many of our once trusted institutions. We must discover our interrelatedness with nature in order to unrelentingly seek to connect to her secrets, which have endured much longer than nation states, or civilizations, or ideologies, or governments, or even organized religion. Become people of grounding, life-giving practices. Become people who sing and dance, who paint and draw and sculpt and crochet and compose. Become people who plant seeds, who nurture them, who reap wonderful harvests of vegetables or herbs or flowers. Become people who reach deeply into meditation and prayer as essential fountains of life. Become people who seek connections with others, linking our arms, sharing meals, telling stories, being vulnerable. This doesn't happen without intentional choice. Those who dismantle the structures that have fed us have systematically put vehicles of destruction in place. Being together this morning, by coming together tonight, Friday night, plants us next to the streams, builds health and calm, drains stress, all of which are acts of resistance. By serving at the Central California Food Bank, or connecting with Firm, or getting out on the streets to call for justice, builds community, which ultimately develops and strengthens our root system. We will be like trees planted. This is a time to redouble our efforts, to learn practices, form alliances, connect with community, embrace reputable sources of information and light that build up rather than tear down. In closing, how do we discern our position, our stance, our direction? We choose our position by turning our hearts to that which is sacred, eternal, divine. We choose our stance by deliberately being with someone whom we can trust, both human and divine. We will choose and affirm our direction from the place of groundedness in nature by practicing solitude, by being deeply rooted in the divine. So when the earth beneath our feet seemed to topple, reel, shudder, we look for something that is solid, something that brings strength and reliability, something that offers a sure footing. In this spirit, I'd like to read a poem by Mary Oliver as an invitation to learn how nature teaches us to bend. As I read, let your imagination take you places as the words and an image that will show on the screen direct you. Goldenrod. On roadsides, in fall fields, in rumpy bunches, saffron and orange and pale gold, in little towers, soft as mash, sneeze bringers and seed bearers, full of bees and yellow beads and perfect flowerlets and orange butterflies. I don't suppose much notice comes of it, except for honey, and how it heartens the heart with its blank blaze. I don't suppose anything loves it, except perhaps the rocky voids filled by its dumb dazzle. For myself, I was just passing by when the wind flared and the blossoms rustled and the glittering pandemonium leaned on me. I was just minding my own business when I found myself on their straw hillsides, citron and butter-colored, and was happy. And why not? Are not the difficult labors of our lives full of dark hours? And what has consciousness come to anyway so far that is better than these light-filled bodies? All day, on their airy backbones, they toss in the wind. They bend as though it was natural and godly to bend. They rise in stiff awareness, sweetness, in the pure peace of giving one's gold away. May we find grounding in ordinary and profound divine lessons, giving us a sure footing for this time.